Have you ever heard of someone so talented that their voice could end a war, yet who was doomed to eternal oblivion? That's right. Among the countless characters in Tolkien's Middle-earth, few bear a burden as haunting and as forgotten as Maglor, Fëanor's second son. What happened to him? Why did he disappear? And why is his story, filled with music, death and redemption, considered by many to be the most melancholic tale in the entire legendarium? The truth is that while many still debate Frodo's ending or Aragorn's glory, Maglor's fate remains shrouded in mystery, a finale without an end, a song without a chorus. And the most surprising part? No one talks about it, because perhaps facing this story demands more than just Tolkien knowledge. It demands emotional courage. In this video, you'll discover a story that few know and even fewer dare to tell, a journey marked by glory, tragedy, poetry, and silence. And I promise you, by the end, you'll never hear the word regret. The same way again, Maglor. Oh, if only they understood the weight this name carries. He isn't just Fëanor's second son, who, let's be honest, already bears a surname as heavy as the very mountain of doom, but one of the few elves born between the gift of nobility and the curse of genius. Back in Tirion, in the soft glow of eternal Aman, he didn't just live, he vibrated. His fingers strummed the harp as if unraveling the very fabric of Middle-earth. Some say that with a single note, he could make even Varda's stars weep. And it's no exaggeration. Music for him was more than art. It was identity. His mother gave him the name Maglor, and if you know a bit of Elvish, you realize it's almost like calling him Golden Voice. But see, that wasn't just about the sound. It was about depth. Maglor wasn't the type to play just for entertainment, but to transform. A little advice: when you listen to music, steer clear of the superficial. Look for soundtracks that tell stories. Grab Martin Romberg's album, The Silmarillion Symphony. There's more of Tolkien's soul in there than in many movies out there. The right music opens portals. And Maglor, he was the master of those portals, but like every great talent, there was a price. Maglor wasn't just an artist, he was Fëanor's heir. And that, my friend, is no small matter. Fëanor wasn't only a visionary, he was a ticking time bomb. A being of fire who sculpted the Silmarils, those cursed jewels that could drive even a dragon mad. And although Maglor had a poet's soul, he was born in the center of a storm forged by pride and desire. Imagine a CEO's child from a billionaire empire who only wanted to be an MPB singer. Now imagine that singer being dragged to war over oil profits. It's something like that, and that's when the rift begins. We look at Maglor and think, the artist. But we forget that artists also wield swords. And when his father decides to seal an oath that would condemn generations, guess who's right there by his side? That's right, Maglor. He swears, along. He seals it together, and not even the songs he would compose later could undo what his blood compromised in that moment. The golden melody intertwined with darkness, and that's when the tragedy begins, because not every song saves. Some leave an everlasting mark. So, listen up. If today you carry a strong talent and a powerful heritage, be careful what you swear by. Not every passion needs to become a purpose. Not every ability needs to serve an oath. Sometimes the greatest gift is knowing how to say no. And Maglor, he didn't know that yet, and it was precisely in that broken rhythm that the next act arose. An oath so powerful that it made brothers kill brothers, turning melody into lament. There are promises that elevate us, and others that chain us for all eternity. Maglor, even though he was a poet, never had time to philosophize much about it. When Morgoth, the Lord of Chaos, thief of the Silmarils, fled north, it was Fëanor who raised his voice. And what a voice! An oath was pronounced there, impassioned, cutting, absolute. Something like, "We shall recover the Silmarils from whoever takes them, friend or foe." Sounds simple? Well, the devil is in the details. Maglor, with his heart torn between family loyalty and artistic sensibility, said yes. And that yes changed everything. From that moment on, Middle-earth's history was stained with a red that not even time could wash away. The first tragedy unfolded at Alqualondë. Imagine this, a people who sing to the wind, sail gracefully, live in peace. And then come their own elven brothers, armed, furious, demanding ships. The Teleri refuse. And what happens? Maglor, along with his kin, takes part, or at least consents, to the massacre. The first kinslaying. It's as if a maestro in front of his orchestra decided to break the violin and grab a knife. The art fell silent, and in its place, the silence of corpses. What's even more curious, many still try to justify it. But they were under the weight of the oath, pressured by their father, overwhelmed by grief. All true, but that doesn't change the fact that Maglor, the singer, became complicit in elven bloodshed. It's like someone trained to heal, choosing to operate in anger, with hands stained by vengeance. A good example here would be to reflect on our own promises. Have you ever sworn something on impulse? Ever defended a cause? Just because you were taught to? Maybe it's worth revisiting. Read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Simple, yet profound. And it helps break invisible oaths. At that moment, Maglor already knew, even if he wouldn't admit it, that he was treading an irreversible path. Each step was like a dissonant note in a once perfect symphony. And yet, he continued, because sometimes guilt isn't a prison, it's fuel. And Fëanor's oath? It was an engine that wouldn't stop, even in the face of the absurd. The second and third kinslayings would come later, even darker, and in all of them, Maglor's shadow was present, even if his harp lay silent. It's ironic to think that the same elf who once enchanted Ammon with his music now resonated with the sound of steel clashing against his own kin. The sound of fury, of loss, of there's no turning back. But what happens when even war is no longer enough to fill the void? When not even another's blood eases the burden of a heart in ruins? If someone still thought Maglor was just the lost artist in a world of warriors, well, the battlefield quickly changed that image. When the Noldor arrived in Middle-earth, it wasn't to set up a music school or recite poetry in the town square. It was war. Pure, fey, brutal war. And there he was, alongside his brothers in the heat of Dagor Nuin Gileath, the battle under the stars. It was in that battle that, even in victory, they lost Fëanor. The father fell as stubborn as ever, attacking too early. A cruel reminder that courage without strategy is nothing more than self-sabotage, disguised as heroism. Maglor survived. But the world around him was already beginning to crumble, and it would only get worse at Dagor Bragolach, the Battle of Sudden Flame. It was there that he lost something more precious than lands or armies. He lost control of Maglor's Gap, the passage he guarded so fiercely. A strategic failure, yes, but also a symbol. His fortress fell just as his faith did. Ever stop to think about that? Sometimes it isn't the enemy that destroys us, but what we fail to protect within ourselves. How many times in life have you seen someone lose control of something that once seemed solid? A relationship, a business, their health. And as if that weren't enough, then comes Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the battle of unnumbered tears. The name says it all, right? A tragedy on an epic scale. Betrayals, ambushes, losses without measure. Elves and men, united by a thread of hope, fall one by one. And Maglor, even among the survivors, wears defeat on his face. Not of the body, but of the soul. The fight became routine. The pain became a language. It's as if every attempt to fix something only sank him deeper. And let's be honest, how many times have you tried to solve something only to see it get worse? That famous, the more you fiddle, the worse it gets. Exactly. These battles shaped Maglor. He was no longer just Fëanor's son, nor just the musician. He was a survivor, a warrior marked by empty victories and crushing defeats. He no longer fought only against Morgoth, but against his own history. And that, my friend, is one of the hardest wars to win, because when you battle what you've become, there's no battlefield that can save you. All that remains is to face the mirror, and not everyone can bear that reflection. And you know what's ironic? The more he fought, the further he drifted from the Silmarils, as if Middle-earth itself were mocking him. But then a new tone began to emerge, a different sound, more intimate, raw, because even amidst swords and ashes, Maglor still had a voice. And like any poet, when the sword falls silent, the soul sings. There is a kind of regret that isn't shouted. It whispers, it slowly corrodes, and Maglor knew that silence like no other. After so many battles, so much blood spilled, and so many broken promises, he did what only the truly sensitive do. He put his pain into words. The song Noldolanta, or The Fall of the Noldor, is not just a musical work. It's a contained cry, a confession in the form of art. Imagine someone writing a poem to ask for forgiveness, not from those they hurt, but from time itself, from history. It's as if he were trying to sew back together with notes what had been torn apart with steel. This kind of creation isn't born of technique, but of trauma. Maglor knew that each verse he composed wouldn't erase a comma of what he'd done. But it was all that remained. The harp returned to his hands, not as an instrument of celebration, but of mourning. And see, that is a powerful example. When everything seems lost, sometimes what you need isn't to move forward, but to write about what's left behind. It might be in a journal, in a song, in a letter you'll never send. Do as Maglor did. Turn pain into memory, not as punishment, but as healing. Even so, the dilemma was cruel, because the oath still lingered, pulsing like a living scar. And here's the key point. Regret without liberation is emotional imprisonment. How many people do you know who live blaming themselves yet keep making the same choices? Who say they're remorseful but never break the cycle? Maglor was exactly that. A poet who knew what he had done wrong but couldn't or wouldn't abandon the oath. It was like someone writing about freedom with their own feet chained. This created a visceral tension. The song grew ever more beautiful and ever more tragic. The more he lamented, the closer he came to the truth, but also to his own impotence. Because sometimes art reveals, but it doesn't solve. It shows the wound, but it doesn't offer a remedy. And the audience of Middle-earth, perhaps they never heard Noldolanta. Maybe it was sung only to the waves, to the stars, to the eastern winds. But that doesn't make it any less real. On the contrary, the pain that no one hears is often the most authentic. And then, in that paradox between confession and continuity, something surprising happens. Amid the ruins of pain, Maglor finds two boys, two innocent lives. And from that moment, a rare chance at redemption emerges, a spark of humanity amidst the chaos. In the midst of the ashes, among broken swords and shattered promises, Maglor found something he hadn't expected: life, fragile, defenseless, yet pulsing with energy. Elrond and Elros, two orphans after the third kinslaying, the massacre at Sirion. Anyone else might have left the little ones to fend for themselves, as the world had done before with so many others. But Maglor, he did things differently. He picked them up in his arms and for a moment forgot the oath, forgot Fëanor, forgot the Silmarils. It was as if the sound of childhood returned to him, a part he didn't even know he had lost. Have you ever noticed how sometimes redemption lies in a simple gesture? Not in grand speeches, but in quiet care. Maglor, the warrior, the poet, the survivor, became an adoptive father. Not out of obligation, but by choice. And that teaches us a lot. Because in times of guilt, a good deed doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be real. Want an applicable example? Become a mentor to someone. Sponsor a book at a school. Mentor a young person. Good doesn't have to be grand. It just needs to be sincere. Just like Maglor's gesture. He not only provided shelter, he gave love. During that period, their relationship blossomed. Maglor taught the boys, sang for them, guided them as if they were his own. And think about it. Elrond would later become one of the wisest and noblest figures in all of Middle-earth. Coincidence? Perhaps, but maybe not. Perhaps part of that nobility was sown right there in the shadow of pain, watered by the care of a broken elf who still knew how to love. Because sometimes those who have suffered the most are the ones who understand the value of protecting someone. Maglor, with his scarred hands, knew how to hold the future without suffocating it. And even so, he knew he couldn't stay. The shadow of the oath still loomed. His love for the boys didn't erase the past, but it illuminated a new kind of silence, that of a necessary absence. At some point, he left. Not because he wanted to, but because he felt he didn't deserve it. And here's another powerful lesson. Not every love can last, but every true love leaves its mark. In that gesture, Maglor became eternal, not in the chronicles of war, but in the hearts of the brothers he saved. And between you and me, that's the kind of immortality that truly matters. But the story doesn't end there, because when the final war arrives and the fate of the Silmarils is decided once and for all, Maglor is swallowed up one more time by an impossible choice. And this time, no song can console him. There are pains that burn, literally, when Maglor and Maedhros, already solitary and shattered by all they had done, decide to steal the last two Silmarils. Fate doesn't just knock on the door, it barges in and tears down the walls. Because the jewels, those that they had coveted so much, reject their new owners. They burn, yes, they literally burn, as if Middle-earth's own fire were screaming, "You are not worthy." And perhaps among all the ironies Tolkien planted, this is the most powerful of all. They pursued the Silmarils for centuries, only to discover that they had already lost the right to touch them. Maedhros, overcome by despair, hurls himself into an abyss with his stone. And Maglor, he does something even more symbolic. He walks to the sea and hurls the Silmaril into its depths. A simple gesture, but one that echoes like thunder, because there, in that silent throw, he finally lets it all go. He releases the oath, releases the pride, releases the past. It's like someone deciding to erase a number from their calendar and stop searching for answers that never come. Sometimes renouncing is harder than fighting, and Maglor, after a life of fire, chose the salty silence of the waves. They say that after that, he began to wander along the shores of Middle-earth, always singing, always alone, a spectre of pain with a golden voice. It's a powerful image, isn't it? But more than melancholy, there's a hidden lesson there. Because Maglor's exile wasn't divine punishment, it was self-imposed. He chose to carry the pain. He chose to sing, not for audiences, but for the wind. And how many times do we do the same? We isolate ourselves, we punish ourselves, we recount mistakes as if they were mantras. Maybe it's time to stop, to write a new song, even if it's just for yourself. And deep down, perhaps Maglor continued to sing, because it was his only way of existing without disappearing entirely. His voice was his anchor, his harp, his confessional. And if today you feel that you've heard too much, that you've gone too far, remember Maglor, because even amidst the pain, he kept creating, kept expressing. And that, my friend, is what separates those who drown from those who learn to swim with tears in their eyes. Create, even in pain. Write, paint, speak, not to erase the past, but to make room for the future. They say that even today, on moonless nights, you can hear a strange melody coming from the coast, a never-ending song laden with lament and beauty. And if you listen closely, you might just recognize the voice of a son of Fëanor, lost forever in Tolkien's music. Now tell me, after all this, what are you going to do with your own oath? Maglor's story isn't just an elven tragedy penned by Tolkien, it's a mirror. A reminder that even the most talented can lose their way, and that sometimes the greatest enemy doesn't come from outside, but from within. And the lingering question is, how many Silmarils are you still chasing? How many mistakes are you repeating out of loyalty to a past that no longer serves you? Will you continue wandering by the sea, punishing yourself in silence, or will you transform your pain into creation, your story into a legacy? Leave a comment below telling me what struck you the most in this tale. Which part of Maglor's journey spoke to you the loudest? I want to know. Let's talk about it. And of course, if this content made you reflect, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. There's so much powerful stuff coming, because in this empire of wisdom, we don't just sing for the sake of singing. We sing to awaken.